My name is Keisha. I'm 32 years old, and I just returned from a 10-day business trip to Singapore. I came home to a silent, cold house in Alpharetta, but I wasn't alone. I heard a scratching sound coming from the garage. I found my 79-year-old grandfather Josiah locked inside. He was dehydrated, injured, and lying in his own filth. He looked up at me, his voice a dry rasp, and whispered, "Marcus did this. Your father locked me in here." That night I made two calls. The first was to 911. The second was to my lawyer authorizing him to freeze the $4 million family trust. My father just doesn't know he's already bankrupt. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever realized your family was your biggest enemy. The Uber pulled away from the curb, leaving me in the chilling November dark. 10 days in Singapore. 10 days of non-stop meetings, sterile conference rooms, and missing my own bed. Our sprawling home in Alpharetta looked perfect from the outside, a beacon of success in our affluent Atlanta suburb. But as I dragged my suitcase up the brick pathway, I felt a familiar knot tighten in my stomach. The house was dark. Not just everyone is asleep, dark, but cold, dead. I fumbled for my keys, the silence pressing in. The front door opened into an empty foyer. "Dad?" I called out, my voice echoing slightly. "Pops, I'm home." Nothing. Just the faint hum of the oversized refrigerator. My father Marcus was 58 and obsessed with appearances. He ran Duval Properties, our family's real estate legacy. He should have been here. He knew my flight was landing. My grandfather Josiah lived with us in the downstairs suite. At 79, he was quieter, but he was always the one who waited up for me. "Pops," I called again, dropping my bags. I walked through the immaculate living room, past the staged family photos where everyone was smiling. My brother Jamal, his wife Ashley, me, my parents. A perfect lie in a silver frame. I headed to the kitchen, desperate for a glass of water. That's when I noticed it. The door leading to the garage. It was an internal door, usually left unlocked. Tonight, a heavy-duty brass hook and eye latch was fastened. From the outside, my blood went cold. "This is new," I whispered. "Why would anyone lock the garage from the inside of the house? It made no sense." I unhooked the latch, my fingers suddenly clumsy. A wave of cold, musty air hit me as I opened the door. The garage light was off. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. And then I heard it, a sound so quiet I almost missed it. A faint scratching, like a fingernail dragging across drywall. It was followed by a low moan, a sound of such profound misery it stopped my breath. My hand flew to my mouth. I fumbled for the light switch on the kitchen wall, my palm slapping against the tile. The switch clicked, but the garage remained dark. The bulb was out, or broken. "Pops, is that you?" I screamed, grabbing my phone from my pocket and turning on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness. The garage was freezing, easily 20 degrees colder than the house. My flashlight beam swept past my dad's prized Mercedes, past Jamal's old sports equipment. And then it landed on him. He was in the far corner, wedged between a set of shelves and the wall-mounted tool rack. My grandfather, Josiah. He was on his side, curled into a fetal position on the hard concrete floor. He was lying in a small, dark puddle that I realized with a sickening lurch was urine. He was shaking violently. His nice clothes, the ones he always wore, were rumpled and soiled. His eyes were half open, clouded and unfocused. "Oh my God, Pops!" I sprinted across the garage, dropping my phone as I fell to my knees beside him. The phone's light spun wildly, illuminating the horror of the scene. His skin felt like ice. His lips were cracked and blue. I grabbed my phone again and shone the light on his wrists. Dark, angry bruises circled both of them, raw and rubbed red, as if he'd been trying to break free from restraints, or just pounding on the door until his skin broke. "Keisha." His voice was a dry, brittle rasp. "Water." "I'm calling 911, Pops. Hold on. Just hold on." I fumbled with my phone, my fingers shaking so hard I could barely dial. The dispatcher's voice was calm, a stark contrast to the panic rising in my throat. I managed to give her the address to explain my grandfather was unresponsive, suffering from exposure and dehydration. As I hung up, I pulled off my own coat and wrapped it around him, trying to shield him from the concrete. I cradled his head in my lap, smoothing his gray hair. "Who did this to you, Pops? Who did this?" He tried to speak, his dry tongue sticking to the roof of his mouth. He lifted a trembling hand, gripping my forearm with surprising strength, his eyes focused on mine, desperate and full of terror. "Marcus," he whispered. "Your dad, he wanted the papers." I leaned closer, straining to hear him. "What papers, Pops?" "Wouldn't sign," he rasped. He wanted to teach me a lesson." A sob escaped my throat. "How long, Pops? How long have you been in here?" Josiah closed his eyes, a single tear rolling down his weathered cheek. Three days. In the distance I heard the faint rising wail of sirens. 3 days. My father had locked his own father in a dark, freezing garage for 3 days, leaving him to die. And I knew in that instant my life would never be the same. The man I called Dad was a monster. The sirens were a piercing scream in the quiet, wealthy suburb of Alpharetta. The red and blue lights washed over the pristine brick of my father's house, a grotesque splash of reality on the perfect image he had spent a lifetime building. The EMTs worked quickly, their movements professional and sure. They wrapped Pops in thermal blankets, his small, frail body almost disappearing beneath the layers. They secured him to the gurney, and I stood back, shaking my mind, a numb fog of horror and rage. Just as they were loading him into the ambulance, a black Range Rover tore into the circular driveway, stopping so abruptly it almost hit the manicured boxwoods. The doors flew open. My father, Marcus Duval, stepped out. He was 58, still in his immaculate golf attire, a cashmere sweater draped over his shoulders. My brother Jamal followed, his phone still pressed to his ear as usual. My father froze, his eyes widening as he took in the scene. He orchestrated the perfect expression of shock and horror. It was a performance. I knew it instantly, and the certainty of it made me sick. "Oh my God," he shouted, rushing forward, his voice booming across the lawn. Dad, what happened?" He rounded on me, his eyes filled with a terrifying fake panic. "Keisha, what on earth happened? Is he okay?" Jamal, 35, and my father's perfect shadow was right behind him. "We just got back," he exclaimed a beat too late. "We've been looking everywhere for him." The EMTs paused, their professional calm faltering as they looked from my father to me. I stepped forward, placing myself directly between Marcus and my grandfather's gurney. "He told me what happened," I said. My voice was cold and sharp, and it cut through the manufactured hysteria. Marcus stopped, his mask flickered. "What are you talking about?" I asked him who did this. I said my words precise. "He said you did. He said you locked him in the garage." The air crackled. Jamal's jaw dropped in exaggerated disbelief. Marcus stared at me for one long, silent beat, and then he did the one thing I should have expected. He laughed. It wasn't a real laugh. It was a high-pitched, nervous sound, a performance for the benefit of the EMTs. "Oh, Keisha, honey." He put his hand on my shoulder, a gesture that was supposed to be comforting, but felt like a vice. "Good Lord, you must be exhausted from your trip. You're hysterical. You've misunderstood." He turned to the EMTs, broadcasting his sincerity to the small audience. "My father Josiah, he's been confused lately. Sundowning. We've been so worried about him. He must have wandered in there and the door must have stuck. These old houses, you know." I pulled away from his touch. "He wasn't confused, Dad. He was lucid. He said you locked him in. He said it was for 3 days. And I'm telling you, he was confused." Marcus snapped, his voice dropping to a low growl before he remembered his audience. He softened it again. He wandered off. "It's a tragedy, that's all." Jamal, ever the golden boy, jumped in. "He's right, Kesh. Dad and I have been worried sick. We've been out looking for him for 2 whole days. We called all his old friends from the Elks Lodge. We even filed a missing persons report. A missing persons report, a bold lie easily verifiable. I knew my father's reputation in Atlanta's black elite was everything. He was Marcus Duvall, the pillar of the community, the self-made real estate mogul whose name was on half a dozen charity boards. He couldn't have people thinking he was anything less than a devoted, loving son. He built his entire Duvall Properties brand on the sacred idea of family legacy. And Jamal, still living on my father's payroll at 35, would say anything to keep that money flowing. I looked at the two of them, the perfect father-son team standing there in their expensive clothes lying so easily, so smoothly. They had their story ready. They had probably rehearsed this. My entire life, I was the odd one out. The daughter who was too serious, too independent, too focused on my own supply chain career. I wasn't family-oriented enough. Jamal was the heir. I was just Keisha, the one who didn't play the game. My father was already charming the EMTs. Thank you for getting here so quickly. We'll follow you to the hospital. Keisha, he said, turning back to me. Why don't you ride with Jamal? You look like you're about to collapse. He was trying to control the narrative, separate me, manage me. I'll drive myself, I said. As my father turned to get into his Range Rover, one of the EMTs, a woman with tired, knowing eyes, touched my arm. She waited until Marcus was just out of earshot. Ma'am, she said in a low, urgent voice. I don't want to get involved in family business, but I've been a paramedic for 15 years. She glanced at my grandfather, now secure inside the ambulance. His condition is severe, but those bruises on his wrists. My stomach clenched. What about them? They aren't from pounding on a door, she said, her voice dropping even lower. The pattern is wrong. They're grip marks, and they look like defensive wounds. Someone held him down and he fought back. You need to be careful. She nodded at me once, a look of grim understanding passing between us. Then she climbed into the ambulance. The doors slammed shut. The sirens wailed and the ambulance pulled away, leaving me alone in the driveway, the flashing lights fading into the night. My father and brother were already in their car, following close behind, ready to continue their performance at the hospital. But I knew the truth. My father hadn't just lied. He had been violent. And he would pay for it. The hospital waiting room at Emory was cold. It smelled like bleach and stale coffee, a sterile, anxious environment that made my skin crawl. My father, Marcus, was not sitting. He was pacing, he was performing. He had his phone pressed to his ear, his voice loud enough for everyone in the waiting room to hear. Yes, it's just a terrible family matter, he said, his voice laced with practiced sorrow. My father, 89. Just a tragic accident at the house. I watched him from my plastic chair in the corner. 89 Pops was 79. My father was already building his narrative, painting himself as the grieving, dutiful son managing a crisis. He was managing all right. He was managing his reputation. My brother Jamal sat slumped in the chair next to me, oblivious. He wasn't pacing. He wasn't performing. He was just scrolling through his phone, his thumb moving in that endless, mindless rhythm. He was probably checking his stock alerts or liking photos on Instagram. He was the golden boy, the heir apparent to Duvall Properties, and this was just an inconvenient interruption to his evening. Neither of them had spoken to me since we arrived. I was the one who found him. I was the one he'd whispered the accusation to. That made me a threat. I wasn't part of their performance. I was the audience they didn't want. The automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss, and the clack, clack, clack of expensive heels on the linoleum floor announced her arrival. Ashley, Jamal's wife. She was 34, blonde, thin, and absolutely dripping in the kind of casual luxury that costs a fortune. She was holding a tray with 2 large coffees from the expensive cafe downstairs. She walked directly to my father, handing him one, with a look of deep, practiced concern. Marcus, you must be beside yourself. Here, I got you your usual. She turned to Jamal, handing him the second coffee. And for you, baby. You must be so stressed. She didn't look at me. I didn't exist. I was just the strange dark furniture in the corner. I knew Ashley didn't like me. I was the career woman, and in her world, that was a polite way of saying spinster. My job as a supply chain consultant wasn't prestigious like the real estate empire my father ran. It was complicated, full of logistics and analytics, and it sent me to places like Singapore. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I had built it myself, and I paid my own bills. Ashley, on the other hand, was a consultant for the family business, which meant she had a company credit card and a new G-Wagon courtesy of my father. She was completely, utterly dependent on Marcus and Jamal, and she hated me for not being the same. Finally, after ensuring her husband and father-in-law were comfortable, she turned her attention to me. Her smile was a tight, bright mask. "Oh, Keisha. Honey, you're here." She sat in the chair next to me, close enough for her perfume to choke me. "You look exhausted from your trip. You must be completely wrecked. I'm sure you just misunderstood what Pop said." I looked at her, my face numb. "Misunderstood?" "Yes," she said, leaning in her voice, dropping to a confidential whisper. "I'm sure you just misheard him. The poor man is confused. He's been wandering, forgetting things. Marcus has been so worried. He's under an incredible amount of pressure right now, trying to hold the company together and take care of his confused father." There it was, the official story, the narrative they had all agreed upon in the car ride over. Josiah was confused. Marcus was the long-suffering son. I was the hysterical jet-lagged daughter who had misunderstood. "He wasn't confused, Ashley," I said, my voice low and shaking with anger. "He was freezing. He was injured. He knew exactly who locked him in there." Ashley's fake sympathy evaporated. Her eyes hardened. "Honestly, Keisha," she said, her voice turning sharp, "I think a lot of this could have been avoided if you were just around more. You should be at home taking care of your family, helping Marcus with his father, instead of flying all over Asia for some logistics job." She had delivered the line she'd been waiting to use for years. My career, my independence was the real problem. My absence was the reason my father had to lock my grandfather in a garage. It was somehow my fault. Before I could even respond, before I could tell her what a parasitic, heartless ghoul she was, another set of doors swung open. A doctor in blue scrubs walked toward us, his face tired and unreadable. Marcus immediately snapped his phone shut and rushed forward, intercepting him. "Doctor, I'm Marcus Duval. That's my father, Josiah. How is he? Is he stable? I need to see him right now. I'm his son. I'm his power of attorney." He was asserting control, establishing his dominance in this new territory. The doctor looked at his clipboard, then looked past my father's expensive suit, his eyes finding mine. "Family of Josiah Duval." We all nodded. "Mr. Duval is stable. His core temperature is up and we're rehydrating him. He's resting." "Good, good," Marcus said impatiently, already moving toward the restricted area doors. "Which room is he in? I'll go right in." The doctor put a hand up, stopping him. "Sir, I'm afraid you can't." Marcus's face darkened. "I beg your pardon. I am his son." "I understand that, sir," the doctor said, his voice firm and quiet. "But Mr. Duval is extremely agitated. He's asking for one person. He was very clear, and we've noted it in his chart. He will only speak with his granddaughter Keisha. He said he doesn't want anyone else in the room. He said to keep you away from him." Jamal and Ashley stared. Marcus looked like he had been slapped. "That is ridiculous. He's confused. I am his son. I have the right to be in that room." The doctor didn't blink. "Sir, I understand you're upset, but my only priority right now is the patient." And the patient's request was explicit. He will not see anyone else, only Miss Keisha. I left them in the waiting room. My father Marcus was already back on his phone, his voice a low, angry murmur. Jamal was staring at his shoes. Ashley was reapplying her lipstick, already bored with the drama. The doctor led me through the double doors into the quiet of the hospital wing. My heart was pounding a heavy, dull rhythm against my ribs. I didn't know what to expect. Was Pops really confused? Had I misunderstood? The doctor paused outside room 305. He's lucid, but he's weak, and he's scared, Miss Duval. Whatever is going on, he needs you to be calm. I nodded, took a deep breath, and pushed the door open. The room was dim, the only light coming from the glowing monitors beside the bed. Pops looked so small against the bleached white pillows. The IV in his bruised arm looked too large for his frail body. But when his eyes met mine, they were not confused. They were sharp, and they were furious. "Lock the door," he whispered. His voice was stronger now, a low rasp that held the authority I remembered from my childhood. I pushed the heavy door shut and turned the deadbolt. The click echoed in the small, silent room. "They're out there, aren't they?" he asked. "Putting on a big show for the doctors." "Yes, Pops, they are." Dad is saying you wandered into the garage, that you were confused and locked yourself in." A dry, rattling sound came from his throat. It was a laugh without any humor in it. "Confused. He wishes I was confused. He's the confused one if he thinks I'm going to let him destroy everything I built." He grabbed my hand, his skin paper thin, but his grip surprisingly strong. "You listen to me, Keisha. You listen close. You are the only one in this family with a good head on her shoulders. Do not believe one single word your father tells you." "Pops, what is going on? Why would he do this?" "Money," he spat the word. "It's always been about money with him." He pushed himself up slightly on the pillows, wincing as his bruised ribs ached. "He's bankrupt, Keisha. Stone cold broke." I stared at him. "What?" "That's impossible. Duval Properties it's one of the biggest black-owned firms in Atlanta. Dad is on the cover of magazines. He just hosted that huge gala for the mayor." "He's a peacock," Josiah interrupted, his voice rising with anger. "A damn fool showing off spending money he doesn't have. I built that company from nothing, Keisha. I bought those first properties with my own two hands when these neighborhoods were nothing. And he and that good-for-nothing son of his, your brother, they treated it like their personal piggy bank." "What did they do?" I whispered, the floor seeming to drop out from under me. "What didn't they do?" he said. "Jamal and his stupid tech startups in California. Marcus poured millions into those failed projects. Millions. And Ashley, that white wife of his, paying her $500,000 a year for consulting fees." "Consulting on what?" "How to pick out new diamonds. They've mortgaged everything. They've leveraged every property to the hilt. They're drowning, Keisha. The banks are calling in their loans. They are about to lose it all. The house, the cars, the reputation, everything." The pieces started to click into place, forming a dark, terrifying picture. "So, that's why he did it," I said, my voice shaking. "He didn't just teach you a lesson. He locked you in there to break you. He needed me to sign the papers." Josiah confirmed, his eyes burning into mine. "He's been trying for months. He wants power of attorney. He's been telling people I'm senile so he can have me declared incompetent. He wants to take control of my personal assets." "But I thought everything was tied up in the company," I said. "Not everything," Pops replied, a flicker of cunning in his tired eyes. "Not the first piece of land I ever bought, the old house, the one on Sweet Auburn." My mind flashed to the derelict, boarded-up building in Atlanta's historic district. "The house on Sweet Auburn, Pops, that building is a ruin. It's been empty for 20 years. It can't be worth that much." "That's what he thinks," Josiah said, a grim smile touching his cracked lips. "That's what your fool of a father thinks. He just sees a rundown building in the old neighborhood. He doesn't know the history. He doesn't know what I've been holding on to. He doesn't know about the city's new development plan. That single block, Keisha. It's worth more than his entire collapsing empire. He thinks it's a quick million to pay off his immediate debts. He has no idea of the real value." He gripped my arm again, his urgency pulling me closer. Keisha, you have to go back to the house. You have to go now, before he realizes what you know, before he sends Ashley or Jamal back to find it. Find what, Pops? What am I looking for? My old office, the one in the basement, the one he uses for storing his wine and Jamal's old junk. Behind the big oak filing cabinet against the back wall, there's a wall safe. A safe? What's the code? His eyes softened for just a second. Your birthday, baby girl. The only thing I never forgot. He tapped my hand. 081993. 081993. You're the only one I ever trusted with what matters. What's in it, Pops? You open that safe? He said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Inside, there's a black leather ledger. You get that book, Keisha. You get it and you run. Do not let him find it. Do not let him talk you out of it. That book is everything. I walked out of Pop's room, my mind racing. The cool, controlled adrenaline of my job in Singapore was nothing compared to this. This was raw fear. My father, my brother, my sister-in-law, they weren't just dysfunctional, they were dangerous. I had to get back to the house. I had to get that ledger. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking so much I almost dropped it. I took a deep breath, picturing a logistics map, a supply chain of actions. First, create a diversion. I dialed my father's number. He picked up on the first ring, his voice impatient. What, is he okay? Did you talk him down? He's resting. I lied. My voice sounded surprisingly steady. The doctor gave him a sedative. I'm just overwhelmed, Dad. I'm going to run home and grab my bag. I didn't even get a chance to drop my luggage from the trip. I'll be back in an hour to sit with him. There was a pause. I could hear him thinking, calculating. Fine, he finally said. Fine. Jamal and I will stay here. We need to manage the situation. Make sure the doctors understand he's not… Well, don't take too long. And Keisha… His voice dropped to that low, warning tone. Don't get any wild ideas. He's just a confused old man. I know, Dad, I whispered. I'm just tired. I'll be back soon. I hung up, my heart hammering. I didn't go to the main entrance. I took the service elevator down to the parking garage, just in case he had sent Jamal or Ashley to the lobby to watch me. Every shadow felt like a threat. The drive back to the Alpharetta house was the longest 15 minutes of my life. Every car that passed felt like it was following me. The house looked the same, perfect, stately, silent, but now I saw it for what it was. A beautiful, expensive prison. A tomb. I parked my car in the driveway, not the garage. I needed to be able to leave fast. I let myself in the front door. The silence was deafening. The air was still and cold. I walked past the living room, past the smiling family photos, my own face staring back at me from a different life. It all felt like a lie. I moved quickly to the basement door and slipped downstairs. The basement was finished, but this one room, Pop's old office, had been left untouched by my father's renovations. It was where he stored his expensive wine racks, and where Jamal's old hockey gear and ski bags were piled in a corner, smelling of dust and sweat. My flashlight beam cut through the dim light. The room was cluttered, a dumping ground for the family's forgotten achievements. There in the back, behind a tower of empty wine crates, was the old oak filing cabinet Pops had mentioned. It was heavy, but I shoved it aside, my muscles screaming in protest. And there it was, just as he'd said. A small square panel in the drywall, painted over to blend in. A false front. I pried it open with my fingernails. Behind it sat a small black wall safe. My hands were trembling again. I took a breath. My birthday, I whispered. 081993. I turned the dial carefully, listening to the soft clicks. Right to 08, past it twice and back to 19, left to 93. I pulled the small brass handle. It was stuck. I pulled harder, and the small heavy door creaked open with a groan of disuse. My flashlight beam found the contents immediately. It was exactly as he'd said. There weren't any stacks of cash or glittering jewels. There was just a thick, black leather-bound ledger. Next to it were a few stacks of old documents tied with string. And on top of those, a single thick envelope. It was made of heavy cream-colored paper. My name was written on the front in my great-grandmother's elegant, old-fashioned script. Keisha. My heart stopped. This was from Serafina, my great-grandmother who died before I was born. I grabbed the ledger first. It felt heavy important. I tucked it under my arm. Then I reached for the envelope. My fingers brushed the seal. I had to get out of here. I grabbed the envelope and the other documents, shoving them all into my large laptop bag. I closed the safe, swung the door shut, and started to push the heavy filing cabinet back into place. It scraped loudly against the concrete floor, the sound echoing in the silent house. I froze. Had anyone heard that I listened? Nothing. Just the hum of the wine fridge. I let out a breath and turned to leave. My hand was on the basement doorknob when I heard it. The sound of the front door opening upstairs. The click-clack-clack of high heels on the hardwood floor of the foyer. "Marcus!" a voice called out. "Jamal, are you home? I forgot my prescription sunglasses." It was Ashley. I froze, my hands still on the doorknob. The basement was the only way in or out. She was upstairs between me and the exit. "Keisha," her voice called down the stairs, closer now. "Is that you? Marcus said you were at the hospital. What are you doing home?" I heard her heels click on the top step of the basement stairs. She was coming down. I shoved the heavy black ledger into my laptop bag. The thick, cream-colored envelope with my name on it went in last. I didn't have time to look at it now. I left the other documents, closed the heavy safe door, and shoved the oak filing cabinet back against the wall. The scrape of metal on concrete sounded like a scream in the quiet house. I took a deep breath and ran up the stairs, my heart pounding a heavy, desperate rhythm. Ashley was standing at the top of the stairs, blocking the path to the kitchen. She was leaning against the railing, one perfectly manicured hand on her hip, a smirk playing on her lips. "Well, well," she drawled, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Doing a little basement shopping, Keisha? Looking for some old junk to remember the good old days?" I clutched the strap of my bag, the weight of the ledger suddenly feeling like a block of lead. "I was just getting my things, Ashley." "Right." She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my bag for a fraction of a second too long. "Marcus said you were very emotional. Hysterical, I think was his word." She stepped a little closer, lowering her voice. "You have to be careful, sweetie. Making wild accusations like that. It could really hurt your father, and he is under so much pressure right now." She was fishing. She wanted to know what I knew, what Pops had told me. "I'm just tired from my trip," I lied, my voice tight. I pushed past her, heading for the front door, not the kitchen. "I'm going back to the hospital to sit with Pops." "Of course you are," she called after me, her voice sickeningly sweet. "You always were the responsible one." I didn't look back. I walked fast through the foyer, out the front door, and fumbled for my car keys. I didn't breathe until I was 2 blocks away, tires squealing as I turned onto the main road. I could still feel her eyes on my back, suspicious and cold as ice. I didn't go back to the hospital. I couldn't. I couldn't walk back into that waiting room with them. I couldn't sit next to my father knowing what he was capable of. And I couldn't risk him or Ashley or Jamal asking to hold my bag for me. I drove downtown, my hands gripping the steering wheel. I pulled into the valet at the Hyatt Regency. I used my corporate card, the one my family knew nothing about, and checked into a room on the 21st floor. The moment I walked into the anonymous hotel room, I threw my bag on the bed. I locked the deadbolt. I slid the chain lock into place. I wedged the desk chair under the doorknob. Only then did I feel safe enough to breathe. Only then did I allow myself to shake. I pulled the black leather ledger from my bag. It felt heavy in my hands like a tombstone. I sat on the edge of the bed, the city lights of Atlanta glittering far below, and I opened it. My grandfather's handwriting filled the first page. Property of Josiah L. Duvall. The Real Books. For Keisha's eyes only. It started 5 years ago, almost to the day, right after Marcus had officially taken over as CEO and moved Pops into the downstairs suite. My grandfather had seen this coming. He had kept a parallel set of books documenting every transaction, every transfer, every single betrayal. I flipped through the pages, and the scale of their theft unfolded before me. This wasn't just mismanagement. This was systematic, deliberate fraud. My hands started to shake. May 10th. I read aloud to the empty room. Wire transfer. $1.5 million to J-Start Innovations, LLC. J-Start Innovations. That was Jamal's ridiculous failed tech startup in California. My father had told the family it was funded by West Coast investors. He had lied. He had stolen $1.5 million from the company from the family legacy to fund his failure of a son. I turned the page, my blood running cold. Monthly payment, I read. $41,666. Recipient A. Duvall Consulting. Ashley. Ashley Duvall Consulting. They were paying her $50,000 a month. No, wait. I looked closer at the annual summary. It was $500,000 a year. For what consulting fees? It wasn't a salary. It was hush money. It was the price they paid to keep her on their side, to keep her quiet about the fraud she was clearly witnessing. I felt sick to my stomach. But it got worse. I kept turning pages, seeing entry after entry. New mortgage taken on Peachtree Plaza property, $2.2 million. Funds transferred to Marcus Duvall personal account. Purpose unknown. He wasn't just stealing the profits. He was leveraging the core assets. He was draining the company dry, encumbering the properties that my great-grandmother had bought, properties that were supposed to be the bedrock of our family's future. I did the math, my mind numb. $1.5 million for Jamal. $500,000 for Ashley. $2.2 million for my father. $4.2 million. In 5 years, they had stolen $4.2 million. It all made sense now. The desperation, the pressure, Ashley mentioned. They were broke. Not just company broke, but personally broke. The company was just a shell leveraged to its death. They were completely and totally ruined. And that's why they needed the sweet Auburn house. It was the last clean asset Josiah had, the one thing Marcus couldn't touch without his father's signature. They weren't just trying to teach him a lesson. They were trying to break him, to torture him, to force him to sign away the last piece of the family legacy so they could feed their addiction to money and status for just a few more months. My hands were trembling as I closed the ledger. They had to be stopped. I looked at the other items I had grabbed from the safe, the old bundled documents, and the thick cream-colored envelope, the one with my name on it. Keisha. I turned it over. The wax seal on the back was unbroken. It was addressed to me, but the handwriting was not my grandfather's. It was an elegant old-fashioned script. It was from my great-grandmother Serafina, a woman who had died before I was even born. I slid my finger under the seal and broke it open. The ledger lay open on the hotel bed, a testament to 5 years of methodical theft. $4.2 million, stolen by my father and my brother. I felt sick, hollowed out. But my hand was shaking as I reached for the other item from the safe, the thick, cream-colored envelope. My name, Keisha, was written on the front in an elegant, faded script I didn't recognize. I turned it over. The back was sealed with a dark blue wax stamp imprinted with the letter D for Duvall. This was old. Very old. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. The wax crumbled and a smell of vanilla and old paper like the inside of a forgotten book wafted out. I unfolded the single heavy page. The letter was dated. Atlanta, Georgia, May 1st, 1955. To my future granddaughter, the one I will never know. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed. This was from my great-grandmother, Serafina Duval, a woman I only knew from a single stern-looking photograph in Pop's old study. Her letter began, "My name is Serafina. By the time you read this, I will be dust. But the legacy I built with my own two hands must endure. I did not buy this land as a wife. I bought it as a businesswoman. While the men of my day were talking about pride, I was looking at property lines. I bought parcels of this city when it was just red clay and pine trees, using the money I earned from my laundries, not the money my husband gave me. I built this, and I will not see it destroyed." My entire life I had been told that my grandfather Josiah had built the company, and that my father Marcus had perfected it. It was a lie. It was all her. I kept reading, my eyes flying across the page. "I am a strong woman. I fear I have raised a weak son. My boy Josiah, your grandfather, he is a good man, but he is soft. He sees the good in people, which means he is blind to the bad. He will be steamrolled by men with more ambition and less character. And I fear his son," she meant my father, "I fear his son will be even weaker. These men, they see land as a possession. They see money as something to spend on cars and women and status. They do not see it as a tool, as security, as a future. They will mortgage the bedrock of this family to pay for a fleeting pleasure. They will sell their future to pay for their present mistakes. They will destroy my legacy in a single generation." My mind flashed to the garage, to Pop's crumpled and freezing on the concrete. He wanted to teach me a lesson. Serafina had seen it. She had predicted Marcus's cruelty, his weakness, his entitlement more than 60 years ago. The letter continued, "Therefore I have placed every asset, every building, every parcel of land, every share of Duval Properties, into an irrevocable trust. It cannot be broken. It cannot be sold off piece by piece. My son Josiah will be the first administrator. He will run the company. He will collect the salary. He will live in the house. After him, his eldest son Marcus will take over as administrator. They will have the appearance of power. They will have the keys to the kingdom, but they will never ever hold the deed." I was barely breathing. She had given them the titles, but she had kept the control. But where was the control? My eyes scanned the last paragraph, my finger tracing the faded blue ink. "The deed, the true ownership, is reserved. The power of the trust, the final authority, the right to buy, to sell, to fire, and to control everything, will remain dormant. It will wait. It will wait until a specific condition is met. This power will transfer in its entirety to the first female heir of my bloodline who meets two conditions." My heart stopped. 1. She must have graduated from a 4-year university. I knotted my throat tight. I had. University of Georgia, summa cum laude. 2. She must possess a career independent of the family business. My supply chain consultancy. The job Ashley mocked as flying all over Asia. The job my father dismissed. It wasn't just a job. It was a key. When this heir reaches her 30th birthday, the control of the trust will activate. She will become the sole beneficiary and the final decision maker. The men will no longer be administrators. They will be her employees. I dropped the letter. My phone, which had been in my other hand, clattered to the floor. I stared at the wall. My birthday. August 19th. I had turned 30. 2 years ago. I had been 32 for 3 months. It wasn't just a trust. It was a test she had set in 1955. A test she knew her weak male heirs would eventually fail. A test I had passed without even knowing I was taking it. I was not just an angry daughter. I was not just a victim. I was the owner. I was the sole beneficiary. I owned everything. The house my father lived in, the cars they drove, The office building Marcus was so proud of. The G-Wagon Ashley flaunted. The salary Jamal stole. It was all mine. It had been mine for 24 months. My father didn't just lock his father in a garage. He did it in my garage. He didn't just steal $4 million from the company. He stole it from me. The game hadn't just changed. I had just been told I owned the entire stadium, the team, and the league. And my father had no idea. The letter from my great-grandmother was trembling in my hand. I owned everything. It was a concept so enormous, so reality-shattering, that my mind couldn't fully grasp it. I was the owner. I was the boss. I was the one they had answered to for 2 entire years without even knowing it. My first instinct was doubt. This couldn't be real. It was a letter from 1955. Surely my father had changed it. Surely it wasn't that simple. I needed verification. I needed proof. I immediately pulled out my phone and dialed the number I knew by heart. Maya, my best friend from Spelman, now one of the sharpest corporate lawyers in Atlanta. She answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and professional. Keisha, what's wrong? You sound like you've seen a ghost. Maya, I need you to do something for me. I said, my voice low and urgent. I need you to run a search. A deep search. I'm at the Hyatt downtown. I'm safe, but I just found something. I need you to look up the Duval Family Irrevocable Trust, founded around 1955, benefactor Serafina Duval. A trust search, Kesh. That's not a 5-minute job. What is this about? It's about everything, I said, my voice shaking. It's about the company. It's about the house. It's about why my father locked my grandfather in a garage. The silence on the other end was heavy. Okay, Maya said finally, her professional tone kicking in. I'm on it. I'll have to call in a few favors to get this expedited. I'll need your full name, date of birth, social. I have a feeling you're about to become a very interesting client. I gave her the information, my mind racing. How long, Maya? Give me an hour, maybe 2. I'll call you back as soon as I have anything concrete. And Keisha. Yeah. Lock your door, seriously. I hung up and began to pace the hotel room, the black ledger and Serafina's letter, feeling like they were burning a hole on the bedspread. I walked to the window and looked out over the glittering Atlanta skyline. All those buildings, all that property. Was it possible, could my great-grandmother, a woman I'd never met, have seen this coming? Had she placed this massive generational bet on me? A granddaughter she would never know. I was so lost in thought that when my phone buzzed on the nightstand, I jumped, a small scream escaping my lips. I rushed over, hoping it was Maya. It wasn't. The caller ID read, Marcus. My father. My stomach twisted into a cold, hard knot. He must be home. Ashley must have told him. He knew I'd been in the basement. I stared at the screen as it buzzed again, and again. He was calling repeatedly, frantically. I let it go to voicemail. A second later, a text message came through. Pick up the phone, Keisha. Now. He was panicking. Good. I let him call one more time. Then I took a deep, steadying breath and I answered. What did you take? It wasn't a question. It was a command, a low, guttural growl. All pretense of the charming, worried father was gone. This was the real Marcus. I don't know what you're talking about, Dad. Don't you lie to me, he roared, and I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Ashley said you were in the basement. You were in Pops's old office. What did you take? The safe. You opened the safe. What did you take? I was quiet for a moment, letting his panic echo in the silence. When I finally spoke, my voice was as cold and hard as the concrete floor he'd left his father on. I saw the real ledgers, Dad. I saw the books you've been cooking. A sharp intake of breath on his end. Silence. I saw the $4.2 million, Dad, I continued. The money you and Jamal stole. The $500,000 you've been paying Ashley to keep her quiet. I saw it all. The silence that followed was terrifying. It wasn't just panic anymore. It was something else. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. It was no longer the roar of a bully. It was the smooth, deadly whisper of a snake. "You don't understand what you're messing with, little girl," he hissed. "You think you're smart. You think you found something. You don't know a damn thing about the real legacy of this family." "I know you're a thief," I said, my voice not wavering. "You're a child playing with matches," he spat. "You need to bring that book back to the house, right now. You give it to me, you go back to the hospital, and you tell that old fool to keep his mouth shut. We can fix this. But you have to bring it back, before you hurt yourself, before you really make me angry." It was a threat. A clear, undisguised threat. He wasn't just trying to cover up fraud, he was protecting something else. "The real legacy?" I asked, fishing. "What does that mean?" "It means you are out of your depth, Keisha. It means you should have stayed in Singapore playing your little logistics games." Just then, my other line beeped. An incoming call. It was Maya. "I have to go, Dad," I said. "You don't hang up on me," he roared. "You bring that book back, or I swear to God." I clicked over to Maya's call, cutting him off mid-threat. "Maya, tell me." "Keisha." Maya's voice was in my ear and she sounded completely breathless. Oh my God, Keisha. It's real. The Duval Irrevocable Trust. It's ironclad. It was established in 1955. It controls everything, every property, the company bank accounts, the house you grew up in, everything. And the heir, I whispered, my knees feeling weak. The condition, Maya said, her voice full of awe, was for the first female heir, a graduate of a 4-year university with an independent career, to reach the age of 30. Keisha, that clause was triggered 2 years, 3 months, and 12 days ago, on your 30th birthday. I sank onto the edge of the bed. Keisha, Maya said, her voice shaking with the implications. He's not the boss. Josiah's not the boss. You are. You own everything. You have owned all of it for 2 years. My other line beeped again, Marcus calling back. Furious, desperate. I looked at the buzzing phone at my father's name flashing on the screen. I ended his call. I hung up on my father. Then I looked at my own reflection in the dark hotel window. Game over, I whispered. I sat there in that sterile beige hotel room on the 21st floor, and I held Serafina's letter in one hand and the black ledger in the other. For a single second, I let myself feel the full weight of the betrayal. The garage, the bruises on my grandfather's wrists, the $4.2 million they had stolen, the lies. Then I closed my eyes and I let the fear go. I let the hurt go. I let the little girl who just wanted her father's approval go. And in her place, a cold, hard clarity settled in. It was the clarity I felt during a supply chain crisis, when a factory in Asia shut down, and I had 24 hours to reroute millions of dollars in product. It was the clarity of command. My great-grandmother had left me a test, and I had passed. Now it was time to claim my inheritance. I picked up my phone. I didn't call my father back. I called Maya. She picked up immediately. "Tell me you're okay, Keisha." "I'm better than okay, Maya," I said. My voice was calm. It didn't even sound like my own. "It's all true, the trust, the heir clause. It's me." I heard Maya let out a long, slow whistle. "So you own everything." "Everything. And they've stolen millions. They just threatened me. I need you to execute the plan, not tomorrow. Right now, I want you to freeze everything." "Are you sure?" Maya asked, but I knew she was already opening the files on her computer. "I have never been more sure of anything in my life," I said. "Freeze the corporate accounts, freeze the lines of credit, freeze the company credit cards. All of them. The ones for Marcus, the one for Jamal, and the one for A. Duval Consulting. I want them to have nothing. By 9 a.m. tomorrow, I want them to be exactly what they are, powerless." "Consider it done," Maya said, her voice now as cold and professional as mine. I'm faxing the notarized documents and the trust activation clause to the bank's fraud division right now. I'll call you when the accounts are locked. I hung up the phone and looked out the window at the Atlanta skyline. It was my city. It was my company. And it was time to take out the trash. The first strike happened at 9:02 p.m. Ashley Duvall was at Neiman Marcus in Lenox Square. She had $2,000 worth of shoes on the counter and was handing the sales associate her white Duvall Properties corporate card. The associate, who usually fawned over her, suddenly looked embarrassed. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Duvall," the associate stammered. "It's been declined." Ashley laughed, a short, ugly sound. "That's impossible. It's a corporate account with no limit. Run it again, sweetheart." "I did, ma'am, 3 times. It's not just declined. It's account frozen by owner. Do you have another form of payment?" Ashley's face, perfectly made up, turned a blotchy, furious red. "Do you know who my father-in-law is?" The associate just stared at her with pity. "Ma'am, the card is frozen." The second strike happened at 9:15 p.m. Jamal was in his man cave in the basement of his McMansion, the one I apparently owned. He was logged into an offshore sports betting site trying to chase his losses on the Falcons game. He clicked place bet on a $10,000 wager. A red box flashed on his screen. "Insufficient funds. Account locked." He swore, grabbing a different corporate card. He tried to access the company bank account to transfer money. A new screen popped up. "Access denied. Please contact your administrator." "What the hell?" he yelled, throwing his mouse against the wall. Dad, something's wrong with the damn accounts." The final strike happened at 9:30 p.m. Marcus Duvall was at the Eastlake Golf Club in the private dining room. He was laughing, holding a glass of expensive scotch, surrounded by his friends, other powerful men in the Atlanta community. He had just finished a round. "Put it on my corporate account, Charles," he said to the waiter, waving his hand dismissively. The young waiter returned a few minutes later, his face pale. "Mr. Duvall, sir, I'm terribly sorry. The account, it's been frozen. Your card was declined." The laughter in the room stopped. Marcus's smile froze. "What did you say?" "That's a computer glitch. Run it again." "I did, sir. It's frozen by bank order. They said all assets of the Duvall Trust are locked." Public humiliation. In front of his friends. His face turned a deep, dangerous shade of purple. He threw down his personal card, fuming. "This is a ridiculous mistake." As he signed the receipt, his phone rang. It was the bank. "Mr. Duvall," a clipped voice said. "This is John Richards, Vice President of Commercial Accounts. We are calling to inform you that we have received binding legal notification regarding the Serafina Duvall Trust. Effective immediately, all assets have been frozen by the new primary beneficiary and sole owner." "New beneficiary?" Marcus growled. "What the hell are you talking about? I am the administrator." "Not anymore, sir," the banker said. "According to our legal team, all power was transferred to a Miss Keisha Duvall 2 years ago. All signatory power for you and Mr. Jamal Duvall has been revoked." Marcus hung up the phone. He was shaking with a rage so profound he could barely breathe. He stormed out of the club, leaving his friends in stunned silence. He checked his email. There it was. An email, sent 1 minute ago, from K. Duvall, chairperson of the Board Duvall Legacy Group, to Ems Duvall, J. Duvall, A. Duvall. Subject: emergency board meeting and notice of termination. The email was short. It summoned them. It summoned them to the corporate headquarters at 9 a.m. tomorrow. It summoned them to my office. He got in his Mercedes and dialed my number, his hands shaking. I was sitting in my hotel room looking at the city lights. I saw his name flash on the screen. I let it ring twice. I answered. "Hello, you!" He roared, his voice breaking with fury. "What have you done?" "I'm just protecting my assets, Dad. The assets you and Jamal have been stealing for 5 years." "I am going to kill you," he screamed, a raw, guttural sound. "You hear me? I will destroy you. You will get nothing." I smiled a small, cold smile. I pressed record on my phone's voice memo app. I knew he'd call back, and this time I'd be ready. The threat he just made was assault, and I was going to need all the evidence I could get. I hung up. The game was on. The elevator doors to the penthouse floor of the Duval Properties building opened directly into the marble reception area. But they didn't just walk in. They stormed in. My father Marcus led the charge, his face a mask of purple rage, his expensive suit rumpled as if he'd slept in it. My brother Jamal followed close behind, looking pale and nervous, his eyes darting around as if expecting an ambush. And finally, Ashley, Jamal's wife, stumbled behind them, clutching her phone, her perfectly applied makeup already smudged by tears of pure frustration. The receptionist, a young woman I'd never met, looked up in alarm. "Sirs, you can't just—" Marcus shoved past her desk, his eyes scanning the hallway. "Where is she?" he roared. He didn't have to look far. He kicked open the heavy glass doors to the main conference room, the ones etched with the Duval family crest. "Keisha!" he bellowed, the sound echoing off the long mahogany table. "What in the hell do you think you are doing? You turn those accounts back on. You turn them on. Right now." I was sitting at the head of the table, his seat, the seat he had occupied for 30 years. I didn't get up. I didn't flinch. I just looked at him calmly, sipping from a cup of coffee I'd had brought up. To my left, my lawyer Maya stood holding a thick leather portfolio. She looked, if anything, bored. "Good morning, Dad," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through his yelling like a blade. "Jamal, Ashley, thank you for coming on such short notice. Please take a seat." "Take a seat," Jamal sputtered, finally finding his voice. "Keisha, this isn't funny. Ashley's cards are shut off. The company cards are shut off." "What did you do?" Ashley, on the verge of a full-blown panic attack, rushed forward. "They wouldn't even let me pay for valet at Neiman Marcus, Keisha. I had to use my own debit card. This is humiliating." I almost smiled. "Humiliating?" I repeated the word, letting it hang in the air. "That's an interesting choice." Marcus slammed both of his palms down on the polished table. The crystal water glasses jumped. "I am not playing your childish games, girl. I built this company. I own you. I own everything in this building. You will fix this, or I swear to God you will never work in this city again." "You don't own this table, Marcus." The voice was raspy, but it was amplified by the room's speaker system. It was strong. My father Jamal and Ashley all flinched, turning toward the 80-inch television screen at the end of the room. There he was, my grandfather Josiah. He wasn't in a hospital gown. He was sitting up in a comfortable armchair in the presidential suite of the Hyatt, a hotel Keisha had moved him to in the middle of the night. He was wearing a sharp blue blazer and a crisp white shirt. He looked more powerful than I had seen him in years. "Pops," Jamal whispered, looking like he'd seen a ghost. "Dad," Marcus said, his voice dropping, the rage momentarily replaced by confusion. "What is this? What have you done, Keisha? You kidnapped him." "I protected him," I said, finally standing up slowly. My voice was even. "Something you failed to do. I brought him to a safe location where he is under private medical supervision and, more importantly, my protection." I looked at their three terrified, angry faces. "I'm glad you're all here. I believe you've all met my lawyer Maya, and you know my grandfather Josiah. As the new chairperson and the original founder, we have officially called this emergency board meeting." Marcus let out a short, barking laugh. "Board meeting? You're not on the board, you're nothing." "Oh, Dad," I said, and this time I did smile. It was a cold smile, one they had never seen before. "That's where you're wrong. I'm not just on the board. As of 2 years ago, I am the board." I nodded to Maya. "Let's begin, shall we?" I said, sitting back down in his chair. "We can start with the founding charter. Let's talk about the Serafina Duval Irrevocable Trust." Marcus stood there, his chest heaving, his face a blotchy red. Jamal looked like a cornered animal, his eyes darting between me and his father. Ashley was already calculating her mind, trying to process the shift in power. "Let's begin, shall we?" I said again, my voice echoing in the sudden tense silence. I nodded to Maya. Maya stepped forward. She was the picture of calm professionalism. She opened her thick leather portfolio on the table, the sound of the zipper electric in the quiet room. "Thank you all for attending," she said, her voice clear and precise as if addressing a regular board meeting. "We are here today to discuss the activation of a controlling clause within the Serafina Duval Irrevocable Trust, established May 1st, 1955. Marcus let out a short barking laugh. "The 1955 Trust. Are you kidding me? That's ancient history. It's a technicality." "On the contrary, Mr. Duval," Maya said, not looking up from her papers. "It is the only thing that matters. The trust is, and has always been, the sole legal owner of all assets held by Duval Properties. It was established by Serafina Duval, your grandmother, to protect her legacy from, and I quote, future mismanagement by weak-willed male heirs." Jamal stiffened. "Weak-willed." "Her words, not mine," Maya said coolly. She slid a certified copy of the trust document across the table to Marcus. "As you know, the trust appointed your father Josiah as the first administrator, with the right of administration passing to you as his eldest son. You have held that title for 30 years, but you seem to have misinterpreted what administrator means." "I am this company," Marcus roared, slamming his fist on the table. "You run this company," Josiah's voice boomed from the television screen. "You never owned it. Mother always said you saw the suit, but you never saw the man inside it. She knew you'd leverage her life's work into the ground the first chance you got. And you did." Marcus's face went white. He stared at his father on the screen, speechless. Maya continued as if there had been no interruption. "The role of administrator was a stewardship, Mr. Duval, not a kingship, and it came with a very specific and very binding termination clause. May I read it for the record?" She didn't wait for an answer. She put on her reading glasses and read from a document. "The title of administrator shall be held by the male line of succession until such a time as a female heir of my direct bloodline shall meet the following 2 conditions. 1, she must have graduated from a 4-year university. And 2, she must possess a full-time independent career separate from the Duval Trust." Ashley looked bored, checking her nails. This all sounded like boring legal jargon to her. "And upon that heir's 30th birthday," Maya continued, her voice clear and loud, "the dormant clause activates. The title of administrator is immediately and permanently dissolved. All administrative power, all signatory authority, and all controlling interest of the trust's assets transfer in their entirety to said female heir." The room was absolutely still. Marcus had stopped breathing. Jamal was looking around, his brow furrowed, as if trying to do complicated math in his head. Maya took off her glasses and looked at me. Then she looked back at my father. "Miss Keisha Duval, a graduate of the University of Georgia with a career in global supply chain consulting, turned 30 years old, 2 years, 3 months, and 12 days ago." The silence that followed was absolute. Jamal was the first to break it, his voice a high-pitched squeak. "What? That's insane, Dad. Did you know about this? This is crazy." Marcus finally found his voice. It was a low, dangerous growl. "This is garbage. A pile of old papers. It doesn't mean anything. I have run this company for 30 years. I built it. Me, not some ghost in a piece of paper." "I'm afraid you're mistaken," Maya said. "The term irrevocable has a very specific legal meaning, Mr. Duval. It means it cannot be changed. It cannot be altered. And it cannot be ignored no matter how loudly you shout. The activation was automatic. The bank has been notified. The state has been notified. As of this moment, your signatory power is 0. In fact, it has been 0 for the last 24 months. She let that sink in. "Which means for the past 2 years, Miss Keisha here has been the sole legal owner of 100% of Duval Properties and all its assets. You have been her employees. Administrators on paper, but legally, just employees. Ashley finally understood. Her perfectly painted mask of boredom cracked. Wait, she said, her voice sharp. Wait, what does she mean all assets, Jamal? What does all assets mean? Jamal was pale, looking at his father for an answer, but Marcus was staring at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. Ashley turned to me, her voice rising in panic. Does she mean the house? The house in Alpharetta? Does she mean my G-Wagon? Is that a company car? Is my consulting fee? Is it her money? Her raw, materialistic terror was ugly and it filled the room. This wasn't about family. It was about her bank account. I looked at her, and for the first time I smiled. It was a cold smile. My great-grandmother's smile. Oh, Ashley, I said softly. That's so sweet. You're worried about your paycheck. I leaned forward, my voice dropping. We haven't even gotten to the part about termination yet. We're still just establishing ownership. I picked up the black leather ledger and placed it on the center of the table with a heavy, definitive thud. My smile faded. Now, let's move on to the next item on the agenda. Let's talk about embezzlement. I let the word embezzlement hang in the air, a poison cloud filling the silent conference room. Marcus was pale, his bravado finally shattered. Jamal looked physically ill, his gaze fixed on the mahogany table as if it were about to open up and swallow him. Ashley's perfectly plucked eyebrows were raised in genuine confusion, her mind clearly struggling to connect her consulting fee to a word like embezzlement. You look confused, Ashley, I said, my voice dangerously soft. Let me clarify. I reached for the black leather ledger. It was heavy in my hand, heavy with the truth. I slid it across the polished table, the sound echoing loudly in the stillness. It stopped directly in front of my father. I believe you recognize this, Dad. Pops kept meticulous records. Marcus flinched, staring at the book as if it were a coiled snake. He wouldn't touch it. You're right, I said, pulling it back. Let's review the minutes from the last 5 years, shall we? I opened the ledger. The pages were filled with my grandfather's neat, precise script. Every number, every date, every lie. Let's start with an easy one. May 10th, 3 years ago. I turned my gaze to my brother Jamal. This one concerns you. Jamal looked up, his eyes wide and panicked. I read the entry aloud, my voice clear and steady. Wire transfer, $1.5 million. Beneficiary, J-Start Innovations LLC. I looked up at Jamal. That was your brilliant California tech startup, wasn't it? The one you told the family was funded by West Coast venture capitalists? The one that went bankrupt in 6 months, losing every penny. That was a loan, Jamal protested, his voice cracking. It was a company investment. An investment, I repeated. That was never presented to the actual owner of the company. Me. Or even the administrator of record at the time, Pops. It was just taken. $1.5 million. Gone. I didn't wait for him to answer. I turned the page and looked directly at Ashley. But my favorite entries, Ashley, are yours. You've been a very busy consultant. Her face went rigid. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you do. Let's see. June 1st. A recurring monthly payment. A. Duval Consulting. $50,000. I paused, tapping the page. No, my apologies. That was just the monthly fee. Let's look at the annual summary. $500,000. Paid to you tax-free for consulting services. I leaned forward. Tell me, Ashley, what exactly do you consult on? Interior design for the lobby? Or is spousal silence a billable service now? Ashley's face went from pale to a deep, blotchy red. She rounded on her husband. Jamal, she shrieked. You told me that was a bonus. You said it was your commission from the Peachtree deal. You told me it was your money. Jamal shrank back in his chair. It was Dad. Tell her that was money you owed me from the... Owed you. I cut him off, my voice sharp as glass. Because it looks to me like Dad was too busy paying himself to worry about you, Jamal. I turned the ledger around and pushed it toward my father. August 5th last year. This one is my personal favorite. A new mortgage, $2.2 million, taken out against the Peachtree Plaza property, the company's most valuable debt-free asset. And where did that $2.2 million go, Dad? I tapped the final entry for that date. Funds transferred to Marcus Duval personal account, purpose unknown. Now it was Jamal's turn to be betrayed. He looked at his father, his face a mask of disbelief. Dad? You took $2 million. You told me the banks were cutting us off. You told me we had no liquidity. You said we had to sell the Sweet Auburn house just to make payroll. I was stabilizing the business, Marcus roared, finally finding his voice. He stood up, knocking his chair over. It was a liquidity transfer. It's complicated financial maneuvering. You wouldn't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, I said, standing up to meet his gaze. 1.5 million for Jamal's failed dreams, $500,000 a year for Ashley's silence, and 2.2 million for your unknown purposes. That is $4.2 million, Dad. $4.2 million that you stole. I closed the book. The heavy thud of the leather cover echoed in the room, a final definitive sound. You stole it from this company. You stole it from this family. You stole it from Pops. And for the last 2 years, you've been stealing it from me. Maya, I said, turning to my lawyer, who had been watching the entire implosion with a calm, neutral expression. What's the legal term for all of this? When you take money that doesn't belong to you from a company you've been entrusted with. Maya smiled just slightly. I believe the district attorney's office in Fulton County calls that felony fraud, theft by conversion, and racketeering. And in the state of Georgia, that carries a rather significant mandatory minimum sentence. Marcus, Jamal, and Ashley were frozen. How long, Maya? I asked. 10 to 15 years, she replied. Per count. And from this ledger, I see a lot of counts. I turned back to my family. Their faces were ashen. The blood had drained from all of them. 10 to 15 years, I repeated softly. That's a long time, a very long time to be locked away. I let the words settle, let them feel the cold concrete of the cell they had built for themselves. Of course, I said, walking to the window. You could probably avoid all of that. I am, after all, family. I looked back at them. Unless you force my hand. Marcus was breathing hard, his face pale and slick with sweat. The bravado, the anger, the 30 years of being the king. It was all gone. He was just a cornered old man, and he was terrified. Keisha, he said, his voice was suddenly weak, pleading. He was no longer the CEO. He was trying to be Dad again. Keisha, listen to me. This is just accounting. It's paperwork. It's a misunderstanding. A big, messy family misunderstanding. He looked at Jamal, then at Ashley, trying to pull them into his new narrative. We can fix this. We can move the money back. It's just a family matter. You wouldn't send your own father, your own brother to prison over a bookkeeping error, would you? Jamal, desperate, nodded along. He's right, Kesh. It's just money. We can fix it. We're family. I looked at him, at my brother, then at my father, who was leaning across the table trying to leverage 32 years of guilt against me. Family, I repeated. The word felt like ash in my mouth. A family misunderstanding. I let the silence stretch out, watching them squirm, watching the hope slowly build in their eyes. They thought I was caving. They thought the old Keisha, the one who just wanted to keep the peace, was still in there. You're right, Dad, I said. This is a family matter. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping loudly against the floor. I stood up and walked to the end of the conference room, to the massive 80-inch screen where my grandfather's face had been. My father's shoulders relaxed. He thought he had won. I turned to face them. You're absolutely right. This isn't about the $4.2 million you stole. That's just vulgar. My voice dropped, becoming as cold and hard as the marble floor. Let's talk about the real family matter. Let's talk about the garage. My father's face froze. The blood drained from it so fast he looked gray. Jamal stopped breathing. Keisha, don't, Marcus whispered, his voice suddenly hoarse. We already discussed this. The old man was confused. He wandered in there. Was he? I asked. I find that security cameras are rarely confused. I nodded to Maya, who was standing by the control panel. Maya, if you would. Maya, my lawyer, spoke in a voice devoid of all emotion. We subpoenaed the security footage from your neighbor across the street. The one whose camera has a clear, unobstructed view of your driveway and garage. It's motion activated. It seems to have captured everything. Let's watch, shall we? She hit a key. The giant screen lit up. The timestamp in the corner read November 11th, 10:17 a.m. 3 days ago. The angle was perfect. It showed the side door to the garage. And then they appeared. My father Marcus and my grandfather Josiah. They were arguing. We couldn't hear the audio, but the body language was violent. Marcus was jabbing his finger in my grandfather's face. Pops was shaking his head, trying to walk away. And then it happened. I heard a small strangled gasp from Ashley. On the screen in crystal clear high definition, we all watched as Marcus grabbed my grandfather by his upper arm. The exact arm the EMT said had the grip marks. He shoved him. He physically pushed his 79-year-old father into the dark garage. Pop stumbled and fell out of view. And then, we watched as my father, Marcus Duval, pillar of the community, looked both ways down the street and calmly slid the heavy brass hook and eye latch into place, locking his own father inside. He then brushed his hands together, turned, and walked back into the house. The room was absolutely silent. Jamal had his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. Ashley looked like she was going to be sick. But wait, I said, it gets better. Let's see who else was part of this family misunderstanding. Maya fast-forwarded the footage. The timestamp changed. November 11th, 4:52 p.m. Jamal, my brother. He walked out of the house, phone pressed to his ear, probably complaining about his fantasy football team. He walked right past the garage door. He stopped. He saw the heavy brass latch. He knew Pops was in there. He had to know. He hesitated for a second, looking at the lock. Then, he shook his head, looking annoyed at the inconvenience, and kept walking to his car. No, Jamal whispered from the table, watching himself. No, I thought Dad was just angry for a minute. I didn't know. You didn't know? I asked. Or you didn't care? And my personal favorite, I said, my voice dripping ice. Ashley, timestamp, November 12th, 11 a.m., the next day. There she was, on the screen, in her $200 Lululemon workout gear, carrying a recycling bin. She walked right up to the garage. She saw the lock. She even reached out and touched the brass latch. She glanced around the yard as if to see if anyone was watching. And then she too turned and walked away. The video stopped. The screen went black. But the reflection of the three of them, pale and horrified, was perfectly visible. You didn't just know, I said to Jamal and Ashley, my voice shaking with a rage so cold it burned. You were complicit. You both saw that lock. You both knew he was in there. And you chose to do nothing. You chose to let him stay in there, in the cold, in the dark, for days. I turned my gaze back to my father. You didn't just steal money, I said. You did all of this. You committed aggravated assault. You committed unlawful imprisonment. You attempted to murder your own father. And for what? I let the question hang in the air. For a house. For the rundown, boarded-up house on Sweet Auburn. A house you were so desperate to sell just to cover your pathetic, stupid debts. I took a step toward them, my voice dropping to a whisper. A house that you don't even own. The video feed clicked off. The 80-inch screen went black. But the reflection showed the three of them pale and shattered. For a full 10 seconds, the only sound in the conference room was the quiet hum of the air conditioning. No one moved. No one breathed. Then came the first sound of their collapse. It was Ashley. Her face was a truly grotesque shade of greenish-white. She made a small choking sound, her hand flying to her perfectly glossed lips. She turned stumbling away from the table and just barely made it to the chrome trash receptacle in the corner before she was violently, noisily sick. The sound of her retching echoed in the pristine $1 million conference room. So much for her $500,000 consulting fee. Jamal was next. He made no sound at all. He had been staring at the black screen, his head in his hands. He simply slumped sideways in his expensive leather chair, his eyes rolling back, and slid unceremoniously onto the floor. He had fainted. A 35-year-old man, a supposed heir, out cold on the carpet. I watched them both, my brother unconscious on the floor, my sister-in-law vomiting in the corner. I felt nothing. No pity. No sympathy. Just a cold, clean satisfaction. This was the consequence. This was the price of their complicity. But my father, Marcus, he was still standing. He was shaking his hands, gripping the back of his chair so hard his knuckles were white. He wasn't looking at his unconscious son or his sick daughter-in-law. He was staring wild-eyed at the black television screen where his father's face had been. "Dad?" he whispered. His voice was a broken, childish thing I had never heard before. "Dad, please." He lunged for the remote control on the table, stabbing at the buttons. "Turn it back on! Turn it back on, Maya! Let me talk to him!" "He has nothing left to say to you, Marcus," I said quietly. "Dad!" he screamed, ignoring me yelling at the blank screen. "You can't do this! You can't let her do this to me! I'm your son! I'm your son!" And then the screen flickered back to life. My grandfather Josiah was still there in his armchair at the Hyatt watching. He hadn't disconnected. He had been waiting. His face was like carved stone, his eyes holding a lifetime of disappointment. "You are not my son." Josiah's voice boomed through the speakers sharp and clear, with no trace of the weakness he'd shown in the garage. "My son would not have locked me in the dark for 3 days. My son would not have left me to die of thirst just to steal a piece of land." I was desperate," Marcus pleaded, tears now streaming down his face, mixing with his sweat. "The bank was calling Jamal. The debts. I didn't know what else to do." "You could have asked for help," Josiah said, his voice cutting. "You could have been an honest man. You could have admitted you failed, but you chose cruelty. You chose to try and murder your own father to cover your tracks. You are not my son. Not anymore. Not since the day you chose money over integrity. Not since the moment you slid that bolt across the door and walked away." Josiah looked at me just once, a small, pained nod. Then his image clicked off, this time for good. Marcus let out a sound, a terrible animal sound of pure despair. He had lost. He had lost everything. The money, the company. His son was on the floor. And now his father had disowned him. He finally collapsed into his chair, a broken 58-year-old man. He stared at his hands on the table. He was quiet for a long time, the only sound in the room Ashley's quiet sobs from the corner. Jamal was starting to stir on the floor, groaning. Finally, my father looked up. He looked at me. His eyes were red, defeated, and utterly desperate. This was his last play, the last card he had. "Keisha," he whispered. "Baby girl." I stiffened. He hadn't called me that since I was 10 years old. "Keisha, baby. I'm so sorry." He was weeping now openly. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. I was under so much pressure. The bank. Jamal. I broke. I'm your father. I'm still your father." He got up stumbling and started to walk around the table toward me, his hands outstretched. Please, honey. You can't do this. You can't send me to prison. You can't take everything. We're family. He was just a few feet from me now, his face a mask of pleading. I know I messed up. But I'm still your dad. And you're still my daughter. My baby girl. Please. Have mercy. He had finally said it. The word I had been waiting for. Family. I looked at his outstretched hands. I looked at his tear-streaked face. And I remembered. I remembered the cold, hard voice on the phone at the hospital. I remembered him trying to gaslight me, to bully me, to threaten me. I looked at him, my face completely blank, my heart a piece of ice. Family, I said, my voice quiet, but it echoed louder than his scream. Family. I took a step back away from his touch. When I called you from the hospital, did you ask if I was okay? No. Did you ask if Pops was going to live? No. I saw his face falter, the plea dying in his eyes. You told me I needed to shut up. You told me I didn't know what I was messing with. You were worried, Dad. Worried that your confused old man would talk. Worried that he would tell me the truth about the monster you are. His hands dropped to his sides. You're not my family. I said the words clear and final. You're just the man who locked my grandfather in a garage. You're a monster. I let that word hang in the air. Monster. My father flinched, the tears stopping his face going slack with the finality of it. He had no more cards to play. He had tried intimidation. He had tried gaslighting. And finally, he had tried pleading. All of it failed. The silence in the conference room was absolute, broken only by Ashley's pathetic, choked sobs in the corner. Jamal had managed to haul himself back into his chair, but he looked like a ghost. His eyes vacant, staring at nothing. I turned away from my father. I walked back to the head of the table, back to my chair. I sat down. Maya stepped forward silent and placed a thick stack of documents in front of me. They landed with a heavy final thud. I looked at the three of them. The thieves, the abusers, the conspirators. I am going to give you something, I said, my voice quiet and low. Something you did not give my grandfather. I am going to give you a choice. Marcus looked up, a desperate, pathetic flicker of hope in his gray eyes. He thought this was a negotiation. He thought this was a family squabble. He still didn't understand. I will not call the Fulton County District Attorney, I said, my voice cold and even. I will not send them the security footage of you committing felony assault and unlawful imprisonment. I will not send them this black ledger which details $4.2 million of fraud and embezzlement. I will not have my father, my brother, and my sister-in-law arrested right here, right now, like the common criminals you are. A small gasp of relief escaped from Ashley. Marcus closed his eyes, his shoulders slumping. In exchange, I continued, for this act of mercy, you will do the following, immediately, without question and without argument. Maya stepped forward and slid the first set of papers across the table. 1. These are your resignation letters. All three of you. You will sign them. You will resign from Duval Properties and all affiliated boards and entities effective immediately. She slid a second stack. 2. These are ironclad non-disclosure and non-compete agreements. You will never speak the name of this company, my name, or my grandfather's name to anyone in a business capacity ever again. You will not work in real estate in the state of Georgia for 10 years. You will never breathe a single word of what happened in this room. I watched my father's face as he processed this. He was being erased from his own legacy. But I wasn't finished. I looked at him directly. 3. This one is just for you, Dad. This is a legal document drafted by Maya irrevocably surrendering any and all claims to the title of Administrator of the Serafina Duval Trust. You will sign over all authority, all rights, and all privileges to me, the rightful owner. And then the final stroke. 4. The house. The beautiful, sprawling mansion in Alpharetta. The one that I own. The one you have been living in rent-free for the past 2 years while you stole my money. I let the words land. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises. You will be out by Sunday at noon. You will take only your clothes, your personal effects, and nothing else. Everything else. The furniture, the cars, the art. It all belongs to the trust. It belongs to me. This time Ashley didn't just sob. She shrieked. Vacate? Like, be homeless. But we have nowhere to go. We have no money. Jamal, who had been catatonic, finally snapped to life. He looked at me, his face a mask of disbelief. But our money, the accounts, you have to unfreeze them. We have nothing. Where is our money? I looked at my brother. I almost pitied him, but then I remembered the video. I remembered him seeing that lock on the garage door, shaking his head and walking away. Your money, I asked. Are you talking about the money in your personal accounts? Or are you talking about the $4.2 million you stole? I tapped the black ledger. Because that, Jamal, is a debt. You don't have savings. You have a liability. You owe this company. You owe me $4.2 million, and I intend to collect. So no, I said, my voice flat. I will not be unfreezing anything. In fact, Maya's legal team, as of this morning, has already begun the process of seizing every personal asset you have. Your stock portfolios, what's left of them. Your bank accounts. Jamal, that ridiculous sports car you're so proud of. Ashley, your new G-Wagon and your diamond collection. No, she wailed. Not my jewelry. You can't. I can, I said. They will all be liquidated. They will be sold at auction to begin paying back the money you stole from your great-grandmother's legacy. You are not just fired. You are not just homeless. You are broke. You have nothing. Of exactly what you tried to do to Pops. Marcus was just staring at the papers. He knew. He was a smart man, and he knew he was trapped. He looked from me to Maya. He was defeated. I stood up and walked to the head of the table. I held up my cell phone. Sign the papers, I said. My voice was quiet, but it was the only sound in the room. Sign every single page, or I will pick up this phone. I will call Detective Harris with the Atlanta PD. I will text her the video of you assaulting my grandfather. I will email her the ledger, and I will make sure that you... I pointed at my father, and you, I pointed at Jamal, spend the next 15 years in a state penitentiary for what you did. I placed the phone on the table in front of them. The choice is yours. A new life starting from nothing, or no life at all. You have 60 seconds. Sign. The threat hung heavy in the room, thick and suffocating. Prison, or complete total surrender. My father Marcus stared at the phone I had placed on the table. His phone, the one I had used to record his threats. Then he looked at the thick stack of papers Maya had placed in front of him. His hand, the hand that had signed million-dollar deals, the hand that had pushed my grandfather into the dark, was trembling. He looked at his son, my brother. Jamal was sitting back in his chair now, his face a ghostly pale, his eyes glassy and vacant, completely broken. He looked at Ashley, his daughter-in-law, who was still weeping into a silk handkerchief, her makeup a grotesque smeared ruin. Marcus looked back at the papers. He knew. It was over. He reached for the heavy, expensive pen on the table. His hand shook so violently he could barely hold it. He pulled the first document toward him. The resignation letter. His resignation from the company his grandmother had built, the company his father had preserved, the company he had run into the ground. His jaw clenched, a muscle pulsing in his cheek. He signed his name, a sharp, angry scratch of ink, his surrender. Maya, silent and professional, slid the next document in front of him. The Irrevocable Transfer of Trust Administration. He signed it. Then came the non-disclosure agreement. He signed that too. Maya turned her attention to Jamal. She pushed an identical stack of papers in front of him. Jamal signed them quickly, his hand moving in a sloppy, rushed scrawl, like a child just trying to make the nightmare stop. He didn't even read them. Resignation. NDA. Ashley was last. She stared at the papers as if they were covered in acid. She looked at the non-disclosure agreement, the legal document that would gag her, that would prevent her from ever bragging about being a Duval again. She looked at the signature line. Her hand, covered in diamond rings I had paid for, was shaking. She looked at Marcus. She looked at Jamal. No one would save her. She picked up the pen and signed her tears, spotting the fresh ink. It was done. Maya. My lawyer collected the signed pages one by one. She tapped them into a neat, perfect stack. They were no longer executives. They were no longer family. They were just trespassers. I let the silence sit in the room for a long, heavy moment. I let them feel the finality of what they had just done. Then I reached for the high-tech conference phone in the center of the table. I pressed the button for the front desk. Janice, I said, my voice crisp, clear, and cold. This is Keisha Duval. Please send 2 members of the security team up to the penthouse conference room immediately. Marcus looked up, his eyes dull, defeated. Security, Keisha, you don't need to do this. We're going. We have some terminated employees, I continued, speaking into the phone, cutting him off, who need to be escorted from the building. The conference room doors opened less than 2 minutes later. 2 uniformed security guards, polite but built like linebackers, stepped inside. They looked at me, waiting for orders. You called Miss Duval? I nodded, not taking my eyes off my father. Yes, these 3 individuals are no longer employed by this company. Their access is revoked. Please escort them to their desks. They have 5 minutes, to collect their personal items. Coats, purses, family photos. Nothing else. Not a single piece of company property. And then, I said, escort them out of the building. They are not permitted here again. The reality of the situation, the absolute public humiliation of it, finally hit Ashley. Keisha, wait! She shrieked, lurching forward, her chair scraping on the floor. Please, I'm your sister-in-law. I'm family. You can't do this to me. She grabbed my arm, her long manicured nails digging into my skin. Jamal is your brother. This is your father. I looked down at her hand on my arm. Her diamond wedding ring, the one my grandfather's ledger showed, had been paid for by a stolen consulting fee, flashed under the recessed lighting. I didn't react. I didn't pull away. I just stared at her hand. I stared at it with cold, dead eyes until she felt the chill. Slowly, reluctantly, she let her hand fall away. I looked at the head of security. They are trespassing. Please remove them from my office. The guards were professional. Sir, one said to my father, if you'll come with me. Marcus stood. He looked like a man who had aged 40 years in 1 hour. He looked small. He didn't say another word. He just turned, his shoulders slumped, and walked out of the conference room. Jamal, still dazed, stumbled after him, a puppet whose strings had been cut. Ashley was last. She let out a broken, ugly sob and was helped up by the second guard. My purse, she wept. My things. I can't. We'll get your purse, ma'am, the guard said, gently guiding her out the door. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling glass wall of the conference room. It overlooked the entire open-plan office of the penthouse floor. I watched them. I watched the 3 of them. My father, my brother, my sister-in-law. As the 2 guards escorted them through the sea of cubicles. Every employee in the office, every person who had feared them, respected them, envied them, stopped working. The entire floor went dead silent. Everyone watched. They watched in stunned silence as Marcus Duval, the CEO, the king, as Jamal Duval, the heir, and as Ashley Duval, the princess, were forced to pack their personal photos and desk trinkets into small brown cardboard boxes. I watched as they were marched, defeated, to the main elevators. I watched as the silver doors slid shut, closing on their old lives forever. The room was completely silent. It was just me, Maya, and the large television screen at the end of the table. "It's done, Pops," I whispered, the adrenaline finally leaving my body, making me feel weak. I sank into the chair. My chair. My grandfather's face was still on the screen. He had watched the entire thing. He looked at me, his face sad, but so proud. "No, Keisha," he said, his voice quiet but strong. "It's not done." I looked up confused. "Pops, you got rid of the sickness," he said, his eyes meeting mine. Now you have to save the patient. The real work starts now." A year has passed since the day I took back my family's company. Today, I am not in a cold garage or a sterile hospital room or a tense conference room. I am standing at a podium in the bright Atlanta sun. I am on the newly restored wraparound porch of the Sweet Auburn House. This is the very building my father almost murdered his own father to steal. But it is no longer a derelict ruin. It's beautiful. We have restored the original 19th century brick, polished the century-old heart pine floors, and the new windows gleam, reflecting a community that is finally being invested in. A large banner hangs above my head, fluttering in the breeze. It reads, "Grand Opening, the Josiah Duval Legacy Center for Black Entrepreneurship." I look out at the crowd. The mayor of Atlanta is here. Community leaders from the neighborhood are here. Reporters from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution are here. But this time they are smiling cameras capturing a moment of triumph, not scandal. And in the front row, sitting in a wheelchair wearing his Sunday best, and a smile so wide it makes my heart ache, is my grandfather Josiah. He is healthy, he is happy, and he is proud. My great-grandmother Serafina Duval bought this land with a vision. I say, my voice steady and clear, amplified by the speakers. She believed in this community. My grandfather Josiah protected that vision. I look right at him, and he nods, his eyes shining. He knew that true legacy isn't just about money. It's about integrity, about what you build, not what you take. Today, we are not just reopening a building, we are restoring that integrity. It's been a long, brutal, transformative year. The day after that horrible conference room meeting, I took control. As the sole owner of the Duval Trust, I became the CEO. I immediately renamed the company the Duval Legacy Group. My first act was to hire a team of forensic accountants. The $4.2 million my family stole was just the beginning. The accountants found debts, bad investments, and liens Marcus had hidden for years. He hadn't just been stealing. He had been drowning. He had been setting the entire company, my great-grandmother's legacy, on fire just to keep himself warm. It took me 6 months to stop the bleeding. I sold off the ridiculous, over-leveraged properties Marcus had bought in his quest for status. I used that capital to pay back the real debts to the banks, restoring the company's good name. And with the money that was left, I started the real work. I started funding the businesses and projects in our community, not taking from it. And my family, the people who had watched my grandfather freeze in the dark, the banks came for them. Once I, as the trust, removed the company's backing from their personal lives, their house of cards collapsed. The bank called in the personal guarantees Marcus had signed. They lost everything. My father, Marcus Duval, the pillar of the community, now lives in a one-bedroom rental apartment in Marietta. He lost the house, the cars, the country club membership. He lost his reputation. I heard from a distant cousin that he now works as a telemarketer selling timeshares. A man who once commanded boardrooms now reads from a script, cold-calling strangers. My brother Jamal, the golden boy, had nothing left when the Duval corporate account was closed. His tech startups were just ideas on a laptop funded by stolen money. And my sister-in-law, Ashley. The moment the money disappeared, so did she. She filed for divorce from Jamal, claiming he had lied to her about his finances. She took the diamonds she had left and moved back to her parents' house in Ohio. Jamal broke divorced and with no actual job skills, now works the night shift. He's the assistant manager at a 24-hour convenience store off the interstate. I didn't rejoice in their downfall, but I accepted it. It was the natural, inevitable consequence of their choices. Serafina's trust had been designed to protect the legacy. It worked. It had simply ejected the sickness that was trying to destroy it. My speech at the opening ends. The crowd applauds. I walk over and kneel by my grandfather's wheelchair. "We did it, Pops," I whisper. "No, Keisha," he says, taking my hand. "You did it. You saved us." Later that day, I'm in my new office. It's the penthouse office, my father's old office, but I've had it completely renovated. The dark, heavy mahogany desk is gone. The oppressive leather chairs are gone. Now the room is filled with light, with modern furniture, with art from local Black artists on the walls. It is my space. I'm reviewing a proposal for a new affordable housing project when my private line rings. My assistant knows not to patch anyone through. This is a number only 2 people have. Maya, my lawyer, and Josiah. But the name on the screen is not theirs. It's Marcus. My hand hovers over the phone. It has been 1 full year. 12 months of complete and total silence. I haven't seen him. I haven't spoken to him. He didn't fight the eviction. He just disappeared. I take a breath. I answer the call. "Hello." There's a long silence on the other end. Just the faint sound of breathing. "Hello?" I repeat, my voice firm. "Keisha." The voice is thin, weak. I barely recognize it. It's not the roar of the man in the conference room. It's the whisper of a telemarketer. "This is Keisha." It's Dad," he says. He says the word Dad like it's a question, like he's not sure he's allowed to use it. I saw the article in the paper about the Sweet Auburn house, the center." "I see," I say, my voice neutral. It's good, Keisha. What you did. It's what I should have done. It's what Pops always wanted." I wait. I know this isn't the real reason for the call. He takes a shaky, ragged breath. I just wanted to say." His voice breaks. "I'm sorry, Keisha. For everything. For the garage. For all of it. I'm so sorry." The word. The one word I had waited 32 years to hear. The word I had screamed for in my mind. The word he couldn't say when he was a king, but could only whisper now that he was a pauper. I close my eyes. I feel the warmth of the sun from my office window. I think of Pop safe in his own home. I think of the new businesses we are funding. I think of the lies, the theft, the cold concrete floor. And I feel nothing. No anger, no joy, no vindication. Just a quiet, sad emptiness. The apology had finally come, but it had come far too late. It didn't matter anymore. "I know you are Dad," I say, and my voice isn't warm, but it isn't angry either. It's just finished. "I appreciate the call, but I have to go now. I have work to do." "Keisha, wait." He starts, his voice desperate. I hang up the phone. I had finally gotten the apology I deserved. And I realized in that exact moment that I didn't need it. I hadn't needed it for a long, long time. I had already forgiven him, not for his sake, but for mine. I turn back to my desk. My great-grandmother's legacy is safe. My grandfather's honor is restored. And my future is finally, completely and unapologetically my own. The greatest lesson from Keisha's story is that your worth is never defined by the people who try to diminish you. Her family saw her as an obstacle, but her ancestors saw her as the future. While her father and brother were driven by greed, stealing, lying, and even committing cruelty, they ultimately destroyed themselves. Keisha reclaimed her power, not just for revenge, but to restore the integrity of her family's true legacy. This story proves that true strength isn't about control or status. It's about surviving, rebuilding, and proving that character is the only asset that truly matters. If you had the power to take everything back from the family that betrayed you, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments below and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice.